Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar, and welcome to the 2017 SOLIDWORKS 201 Basic Part Modeling that Captures Your Design Intent. My name is Paul Nishihira, Applications Engineer with GoEngineer. So in today's workflow process is where do I begin? Establishing if we want to start on the front plane, the top plane, or the right plane. What, where, and when to best utilize specific SOLIDWORKS features. For today's example, we are going to be focusing on the extruded boss base as well as extruded cuts. We do have some revolved boss base features and some swept boss base as well, as indicated down in this area right here. I will talk about the explanation of sketch-based features and applied features. And then, of course, last but not least, editing your existing sketches and features. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into SOLIDWORKS. So for today's model, I'm going to go ahead and focus on this housing assembly, and it's basically a transmission gear. And let me go ahead and do a little bit of simplification here. So if you notice, we have our assembly, and more importantly, I want to go ahead and focus on the main housing, because this is what is there we go. What we're going to be talking about. And I do realize that we have a lot of additional features. If you notice, we have these mounting hole bosses, the side bosses and supports for the shaft, and then of course some internal features as well. But to break it down in a simplicity level, let's go ahead and we'll open up the actual part model here. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and roll the bar back here. All right. So from a basic profile shape perspective, this is what we're going to start with, and there's a lot of different ways to actually create these features, and I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of different methods and determine which one is going to work best. One of the important things that I do want to determine before I start my part modeling is making sure that the orientation of my part is going to be reflecting the same positions as far as in the drawing environment. I do want to have this particular view as my front view. Of course, this view is going to be the right side view, and then orientation wise, from an isometric perspective, this is how it's going to look. Okay, so kind of keep this in mind as we go ahead and do some modeling techniques here. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up a new document, and it is a metric part here. So the first methodology is called the layer cake method. What that indicates is that we're building basic features from sketches, and we're essentially building it on top of each other. Now if you remember that the way I had my part orientated in the drawing environment, it's basically going to be normal to the front plane. So as I'm making my features, I actually want to start out on the right plane, and I'll show you how this all plays out. So let's go ahead, we'll just start a sketch here, and I'm going to create some basic circular features and throw on a couple of dimensions. Okay, and now let's go ahead and make my feature. Okay, great. So now this is going to be my quote-unquote flange area right here. One of the other nice things about SOLIDWORKS, in addition to creating sketches on your reference planes, is that you can actually pick any planar face. So what I'm going to do is pick this face right here, and I'm going to start a brand new sketch. And again, I'm going to go ahead and do another extruded boss feature, and then we'll throw on a couple of dimensions. And we'll go ahead and extrude it out. Essentially what I'm doing is basically creating one simplified feature. Here's our first one, and then after that building right on top of that. This is what we call our layer cake method. Now, one thing to keep in mind, as I've noticed with a lot of customer questions, is that you do have the option to actually break this into two separate features. So what I mean by that is I'm going to go ahead and actually go back into this Boss Extrude 2. So when I left click on the icon, we do have a choice. We can either edit the sketch or edit the feature. So what I want to do is click on Edit Feature. And there's this checkbox over here. It's called Merge Result. So if I uncheck this and then hit the green checkmark K, there is a solid bodies folder that pops up. And then now this will distinguish between two individual part features unique to itself. So let's go ahead and go back, and we're going to edit the part feature again, and I'm going to go ahead and maintain my merge result, and this will end up as one complete unit. You can see we don't have that solid bodies folder here anymore. So the last feature I want to put on, again, it's on this top face again, so I'm going to actually access my sketch this way. It's going to be this icon right here, and we'll go ahead and throw in our last profile sketch. And we'll throw a dimension on here. And we'll extrude it out. So as mentioned earlier, with the layer cake method, we have 3 unique part features, as I'm highlighting them out accordingly. And the nice thing about this is that from a simplicity standpoint, it's very easy to create, and it's also very easy to edit. So if we wanted to change maybe the overall diameter or maybe the extrusion length, it's just a matter of editing the part feature. Whether we access it here, we can go to Edit Feature here. Or if we have Instant 3D enabled, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my Features tab, and it's this button right over here. What this is going to do, by doing a single left click on the model, it'll actually wake up the appropriate dimensions. So if I wanted to make changes, instead of 46.5, maybe round it up to like 46 as an example, I can go ahead and make those changes dynamically right in the display area. It's a really nice time savings function. And I realize I am going to skip here a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit about applied features. If you notice that with all of these boss extrudes, we had created a sketch, and then from that sketch geometry, which are the appropriate circles, we went ahead and extruded it out to create our features. Now the nice thing about an applied feature is that you no longer need to use a sketch. So what I'm going to do in this instance is use the shell command, and then I'm going to maintain a wall thickness of 4 millimeters right up in this area. And the great thing about this particular command is that whatever you cut away, or select I should say, so if I'm going to select that face and then this back face over here, when I hit the green check mark for OK, it'll go ahead and update the model with that 4 millimeter wall thickness. Okay, so this is a pretty nice design. And then of course, to apply materials, if we want to define the actual weight and everything, it's a matter of coming to the material, right click, and then we'll go ahead and assign a cast alloy steel. And here the nice thing about this is that not only visually does it apply the textures and the colors for that material. If we go to the Evaluate tab and then Mass Properties, we can figure out all of the appropriate information that's applied with that material. Okay. And actually I'm going to go ahead and I just wanted to show you everyone this cast alloy steel. You can see all of the different material properties that's associated with this particular material assignment and the appearance as well. Okay, so this is the layer cake method. Again, very easy to do. It's just a series of simple sketches and features, and then finishing it out with my applied feature here, which is the shell command. Okay, so let me go ahead and close this out. So the next one I'd like to show you is, it's called the manufacturing approach. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently here, and the reason for this is that orientation-wise, I still wanted to bring in normal to the front plane as far as my profile goes, but when I create my sketches for this particular feature, it's going to be a slightly different methodology. So here again, I'll click on the front plane, we'll create a brand new sketch, and this time I'm just going to go ahead and just do a simple line here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and put a dimension on. This is going to be my overall length. Okay. Alright, so what I'm going to do now actually is something called a swept boss base. And then one of the nice things about this is that for this particular property manager, I'm going to use a circular profile and select the path. And then my diameter is going to be 94. And then we have our part. So when I say manufacturing approach, think of it as you're starting out, for those of you familiar with lathe and turning, think of it as a piece of bar stock that you're starting out with, and you're slowly cutting away material from that bar stock. So at this point, since I've got the major profile already done, now it's a matter of creating additional geometry so I can cut away at it. So again, I'm going to be looking normal to the front plane, and I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. And let's go ahead and create some geometry. And I'll show you two different unique ways of applying some cut extrude features here. And the other thing I'm going to do is also reference my my main line down over here. So again, we're going to go ahead and throw on a couple dimensions. Okay, and then from here I'm going to do something called a revolve cut. For this one, the axis of revolution, it's going to be the center line, or this main line that's running through the part. And you can actually see a preview of what's about to happen. Okay, we'll hit the green check mark for OK, and then now we have our first cut feature. So similarly is using another revolve cut, we're actually going to do what we call a thin feature, and I'll show you how that works. This is actually kind of a cool function here. So again, we're going to create another sketch on the front plane, and also some line geometry as well. But this time I'm just going to create a single line entity. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and, as best practices goes, fully define my sketch. And we're going to add a couple of sketch relations here. And then one last dimension out on this side. So this time I'm just going to jump right into features, and then we'll do a revolve cut. And now let me go ahead and change it back to isometric view so at least we can see what's happening here. Axis of revolution, that's still going to be the same. This is going to be our center line right here. But if you notice that because we have what we call a single line sketch or an open sketch, we have a box that was automatically checked here. It's called thin feature. What I could do with this is actually determine if I want to cut in one direction, cut in the other direction. It's just a matter of clicking on the reverse direction arrows. We do have some other options. We can go one direction, mid-plane, and two direction. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and type in the default value of 15 millimeters. And then we'll go ahead and click on OK. And then there's our part. Okay. And here again, when you break down the features, you know, we have this sweep feature, and then of course two additional cut revolve features. Okay, one is using what we call a closed sketch, as indicated here. And the other one is just a single line sketch. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and actually save this, because I'm going to revisit this here as well. Okay, and we'll just minimize this for right now. Okay, last, as far as our design options go, it's something what we call a potter's wheel approach, and this is actually one of my favorites that I like to use. So again, we'll go ahead and just start a brand new template here. And we are going to be creating the profile on the front plane and essentially using a revolve feature to create this particular geometry. So again, I'm just going to click on the front plane and create a brand new sketch. There is a little bit of a different setup here that we need to do, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually establish a center line. So I'm going to left click on my line geometry, and this construction geometry, this is something that you can just toggle by clicking on the button here. And this is more of just a personal preference, but I always like to establish my overall length right off the bat. Basically scales the entire sketch in relationship to this first line geometry. Okay. And then now it's a matter of creating my profile. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of my inference lines here to make it a little bit easier for me. And we'll add the appropriate sketch relations. And then now let's go ahead and throw in a couple of dimensions. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind when you're doing revolve features, especially if you're using a center line, is that you can actually dimension two different ways. You can do a radial dimension. If you notice, my mouse is up in the upper section or to the top of the center line. If I move my mouse down towards the bottom, you can actually see it dimensioning kind of out in space. So if you wanted to do a diameter dimension, it's just a matter of mousing over down here, left click to place it, and then we'll go ahead and make that at 29. And then we'll throw in our additional dimensions here as well. Here again, I'm going to go to the other point here. I'm going to move my mouse down. If you notice, here's a radius dimension or radial dimension, and then here's diameter. Okay, great. So we have a fully defined sketch. All of our geometry is in black. This is what we ultimately want for best practice. And then now, let's go ahead and we'll jump right into features, and again, revolve boss space. Okay, now if you notice that because we have what we call, quote, a open sketch, we're going to get this message that pops up. And basically what SOLIDWORKS is telling us is that, you know, would you like the sketch to be automatically closed, or if we don't, we can actually create a non-thin revolution feature. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click on no. And here's the cool part. We can determine, again, depending on which direction we want, one direction, mid-plane, or two direction. But what I want to do is we're going to offset it 4 millimeters. This is our thickness. And I'm going to flip it around the other way right there. Okay. And again, here's our part. Now, one of the nice things about this particular technique is that you are only using one sketch and it's creating one feature here in the feature manager tree. The caveat with that, though, is that you do have to be very mindful as far as how you want to create your sketch. Okay, if you notice that I did do a lot of pre-work as far as setting up my center line, my dimensions, having all of my sketch relations and whatnot. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and we're going to go back to our other geometry here, and I'd like to talk about some differences between sketch features and applied features. So with sketch features, we are able to drive geometry at the sketch level. So as an example, if I wanted to add a small radius down in here, what I would do is modify this particular sketch. So going back to the edit sketch mode, there's actually a couple different ways. I can go ahead and left click on the sketch and do an edit sketch. I can click on the particular feature, and then it's this icon here called edit sketch. Another nice functionality, this is more related to 2016 and 2017, is the use of breadcrumbs. So again, I click on that same feature, I'm going to get a series of icons that pop up here in the upper left portion of the screen. Doesn't really do me any good since it's way up here. However, if I move my mouse back over to this area and hit the D key, D as in Delta, it'll actually present those selections there for you. So we can hover over sketch 14, left click on that, and do an edit sketch. Okay, and I'll go ahead and focus in on this area right here. So as mentioned earlier, I'm going to go ahead and apply a sketch fillet down in this area. So right up over here on my sketch tools, I have sketch fillet. And we'll apply a 1mm fillet. And it's a matter of picking on that common vertex point. You can see a highlight that pops up there. It's a nice little function of what's about to happen. Green check mark. Let it update. And then now when we close out of our sketch, we have what we call a sketch feature. So as mentioned earlier, with applied features, when we had used the shell command, a sketch is no longer used. So for this one, we'll go ahead and apply a fillet. And we'll make that at 2mm. And we'll pick these two edges here. Okay. And here again, this is where design intent comes into play. If these two fillet features are going to be of the same value, then picking the two edges is one option that we can do. Another option would be this. We can actually click the face, and it'll go ahead and apply the two fillet features. Now if we did want to have them run independently of each other, I can actually click on the fillet feature. Here again, this is just another way of accessing my edit feature. I can left click this face again to unselect it, and then rather I can actually click the individual edges now. Okay. Maybe give it a little bit more control. In fact, I'll do it this way here. So that'll be one. And then we'll change this one to 1mm. Okay, here again, just different ways of doing things for your design intent. One thing that I always like to use as best practice is before starting any project, just determine what profile works best and its relationship to the SOLIDWORKS drawing views. So capturing that profile for your front view, the right side view, maybe the top view, just kind of get a game plan essentially started before putting anything to SOLIDWORKS. Here again, if you notice the differences between using sketches, if you want to have a complex sketch to create your feature, or maybe as in the layer cake method, just create a series of simple sketches and features and then apply them on top of each other to create your end result. This is again, depending on how you look at it, if you want to invest more time up front with the sketches, you're going to end up with one feature, or if you wanted to just create a series of simple sketches and features, you can do that as well. Okay, it just really depends on how complex or simplified you want to have in your feature manager tree. This rule right here always works best for me. Create extruded features first, meaning that you're creating material, and then after that just cut away what you don't need. And of course, last but not least, it's kind of a rule in life that I like to use. Keep your features simple. They're just a lot easier to edit. Well, thanks again for joining in this webinar. And again, this is Paul Nishihira with GoEngineer. Folks, have a great day. Thank you.